It was the last major landmass to be discovered by humans, it has the most remote capital city in the world, and rugby is a national obsession there. These are just 3 of the things that you're going to learn about New Zealand. Today we're going to focus on New Zealand, a country known for its geographic isolation, but also for its unique landscapes and its indigenous Maori culture. New Zealand is an island nation located in the Southwestern Pacific Ocean, with an area of 268,021 square kilometers. The country consists of 2 major islands, the North Island and the South Island, in addition to over 700 other smaller islands. Since it encompasses all of its islands, New Zealand has one of the largest exclusive economic zones in the world, at over 15 times its land area. Since the southern part of the South Island is relatively close to Antarctica, New Zealand also has a territorial claim on Antarctica, known as the Ross Dependency. But claims over Antarctica are not recognized by most countries internationally. New Zealand also has 1 dependent territory, Tokelau, and 2 sovereign states in free association with it, Niue and the Cook Islands. Free association. That means they're self-governing and voluntarily allow New Zealand to handle their foreign affairs and defense. These territories and states in free association are collectively known as the Realm of New Zealand. The closest of them to New Zealand proper is Niue, which is around 2,400 kilometers away. 2,400. New Zealand is notable for its isolation. Its closest neighbor is Australia, but it's over 2,000 kilometers to the Australian mainland. As a result, New Zealand was uninhabited until probably the 13th century, when Polynesian peoples from eastern Polynesia began to settle there. It's not certain exactly where they originated, but the Cook Islands, Tahiti, and the Marquesas Islands are the likely candidates. For the next several hundred years, these Polynesian people, known as Maori, were the only people there. But in the 17th and 18th centuries, when British colonies were established in Australia, some Europeans came to the area of New Zealand as well, either for whaling, trade, or missionary work, and some began to settle there. Some of them were escaped convicts from Australia, or sailors who stayed behind when their ships left. It must have been pretty hard to leave behind the beauty of a place like New Zealand and get back on a ship for months at a time. New Zealand was part of the colony of New South Wales in Australia from 1788 to 1840 when the British signed the Treaty of Waitangi with the chiefs of Maori tribes, making New Zealand its own British colony, rather than an extension of New South Wales. This signing is widely considered to be the founding event of New Zealand, even though New Zealand remained a colony until 1907. After the treaty was signed, a more systematic flow of immigrants began to settle there, most of them from England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. Until the 1970s, New Zealand's population consisted almost entirely of Europeans and the indigenous Maori people, as New Zealand had a restrictive immigration policy that favored, well, a certain type of person. But since those policies were changed, a significant number of people have arrived from the Pacific Islands, East Asia, and other parts of the world. Today, New Zealand has a fairly small population of 5.1 million people. And at this point in the video, most other people would point out that there are 6 times as many sheep as there are people, but I'm not going to do that. The vast majority of the people speak English as their native language, which is one of the official languages. The other official languages are Maori, the historical language of the Maori people, and New Zealand's Sign Language. To see my videos all about New Zealand English and the Maori language, you can find the links in the description of this video. New Zealand is part of a larger unit called Zealandia, a piece of continental crust that became almost completely submerged around 85 million years ago. 25 million years ago, changes in plate tectonics caused parts of Zealandia to crumple and contort upwards. When this section rose above water, the land that we know as New Zealand was born. The physical landscape of New Zealand reflects that geological history. The South Island is very mountainous, with the Southern Alps running the length of the island, and many of its mountains are high enough for glaciers to form. You may have seen the Southern Alps before without realizing it, because they are the real-life misty mountains that appear in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. The highest peak in the Southern Alps is Mount Cook, also known as Mount Aoraki, at 3,724 meters. The South Island's dramatic west coast, with its cliffs and fjords, can be experienced along the Cape Foulwind Walkway and Milford Highway. The South Island of New Zealand is the larger of the 2 main islands. In fact, it's the 12th largest island in the world, but it's sparsely populated, with only 1/4 of New Zealand's population. And for a bit of a wilder comparison, it's larger than Java, Indonesia, the 13th largest island, but its population is less than 1% of Java's. Most of the people live in the Canterbury Plain on the east coast, which is where you'll find Christchurch, the island's largest city. Across the Cook Strait is the North Island, which lacks the dramatic peaks and glaciers of the South Island and is less mountainous, but it does have several active volcanoes. In the southern part of the island, you'll find many pristine lakes formed on volcanic craters. Lake Taupo, the largest lake in New Zealand, is one of these. The volcanic activity has resulted in its current serene beauty, but it hasn't always been this serene. The volcano below the lake erupted 26,000 years ago with a force 1,000 times greater than the eruption of Mount Vesuvius that destroyed Pompeii. The capital of New Zealand, Wellington, is the most remote capital city in the world, located near the southern tip of the South Island. It's also the windiest city in the world. Sorry, Chicago. Despite these somewhat fear-inducing titles, Wellington is actually a very pleasant city. Surrounded by hills such as Mount Victoria, Wellington receives plenty of rain, and its gardens and Victorian mansions are popular with locals and visitors alike. New Zealand's largest city is Auckland, which is found up north on the Northern Island. Auckland's position on an isthmus means that it has harbors on two major bodies of water, the Tasman Sea and the Pacific Ocean, one of the few cities to hold this distinction. Well, that's kind of true, but the Tasman Sea is actually a subdivision of the Pacific Ocean, so it's not precisely true. Today, Auckland is a diverse, multicultural city which ranks near the top on quality of life surveys. The white sandy beaches and wineries on nearby Waiheke Island offer a chance to escape from the bustling city when you need to. You can see Waiheke Island from the Sky Tower, which is a recognizable symbol of Auckland, and the tallest freestanding structure in the southern hemisphere, at 328 meters high. North of Auckland lies Waipoua Forest, where you can stroll amongst magnificent kauri trees. There's also the Goat Island Marine Reserve, which is not an island full of goats, but rather an important marine wildlife reserve. Personally, I would have preferred goats, but whatever. While the far north of the country closest to Australia has something close to a humid subtropical climate, most of New Zealand has a temperate oceanic climate, characterized by mild summers and cool winters, without extreme temperatures, and with plentiful rain year-round. In some ways, New Zealand's climate is similar to the UK's, but New Zealand's winters are sunnier and shorter. But at higher elevations, the climate gets much colder. Because Zealandia was almost completely submerged for 60 million years, almost all of its native species flew there. As a result, New Zealand is famous for its incredible avian diversity, avian meaning related to birds. One extinct but amazing bird was the giant moa, which was twice as large as an ostrich. This species disappeared shortly after humans arrived. Of course, there are other well-known species of birds that still exist today, such as the kakapo, kiwi, and kia. And being nutrient-rich, the waters off of New Zealand are also home to plentiful sea life, including penguins, seals, and whales. New Zealand's flag has a blue background with a Union Jack in the top left corner and the Southern Cross constellation on the right. If that looks familiar, yes, it's very similar to Australia's, but be careful not to confuse the two because New Zealanders really don't like that. In 2016, New Zealand had a referendum to decide whether to adopt a new flag, chosen from citizens' submissions. This proposed flag featured the silver fern plant, which grows naturally in New Zealand, but the majority voted to keep the current flag. Rugby is the national sport, or should I say, national obsession of New Zealand. The New Zealand national team, the All Blacks, has won the Rugby World Cup 3 times, in 1987, 2011, and 2015. Rugby has, in some small way, become an avenue for the dissemination of Maori culture. If you've ever seen a haka, a traditional Maori dance, before a rugby match, you've seen a bit of Maori culture yourself. The haka was originally a war dance done to intimidate their opponents and boost their own morale and motivation before battle. New Zealand's economy was historically dependent on exports. In its early history, the important exports were whale products and wool, because an absolutely massive number of sheep equals a huge amount of wool. Later, resource extraction like mining and forestry became important. Today, the economy of New Zealand is similar to other developed countries, with services and advanced manufacturing being the most important sectors. One notable thing about New Zealand is that nearly a quarter of its highly skilled workers work abroad, which has caused worries about brain drain from the country. But on the other hand, New Zealand has also been benefiting from brain gain, as many skilled professionals move there from abroad. It's not hard to understand why. If you lived in a crowded, noisy, polluted city, wouldn't you want to move to a place like this? New Zealand may be a geographically isolated country, but despite that, or maybe because of that, New Zealand punches above its weight internationally. It's a highly respected country, and Kiwis generally have a great reputation around the world. And most people who've had a glimpse of New Zealand would love to see it in person, even if they haven't been able to make the long journey yet. And for most people, it is a pretty long journey. Now over to you. What's something that comes to mind when you think of New Zealand? And if you happen to be a Kiwi, what's an annoying misconception that people have about your country? Leave your answers in the comments down below. Do you want to see videos from this channel before anyone else? Become a member of this channel and you'll see videos 1 week early and without any ads or promotions, completely ad-free. Click the join button next to the subscribe button for more information. And to everyone, thank you for watching and have a nice day.